Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States, has told the rest of the world they need to buy more American cars. Well, it's simply not going to happen, and I'm going to explain why American cars aren't that popular here in Europe, especially here in the UK and the rest of Europe, because there's some actual solid reasons on why we don't buy American cars. But also why Europeans' cars are very popular in America. Both sides of the pond are going to learn quite a lot of information in this video, but I'm going to surprise everyone by actually agreeing with Donald Trump on something, which is I fully agree on the tariffs he's imposed on Chinese cars and European cars coming into the United States, because weirdly, he's actually got a point. Now, to anyone in Europe, it's obvious why we don't buy American cars, and that's just down to size. American cars are a lot larger than what we drive in Europe. Now, I've got some typical examples. This is a little scale model of a Model 3, and this here is a scale model of a Model S Tesla. So you can see straight away, side by side, that these cars are very different in size. Now, the Model 3 is actually still a large car to what most Europeans are used to. For scale on that, I've got a Roadster. Now, a Roadster is still larger in length than what most Europeans are used to, because we drive a most popular car in Europe for a very long time was the Ford Fiesta. Ford Fiesta is a segment of cars that we know as a hatchback. A hatchback is typically a 3 or 5-door vehicle, which is relatively small, and we call it hatchback because the back glass of the boot lifts up at the same time, which is why it's usually called a 3-door or a 5-door, because the glass comes up with it. But they are very, very squashed, very sort of nose squashed in. Think more like EV1 kind of sort of sizes on cars. They're the type of cars here in Europe we're used to. And basically next to your truck culture, your Cybertruck, your F-150s, our cars would look like child's toys. They just don't look like the big cars. And there's a couple of reasons why we have smaller cars. So one of the main reasons is our streets. We have older cities, we have older roads. Europe's been around a lot longer than America has, so to speak, in terms of being industrialized, having roads, having all this rail network infrastructure, etc. We are very, very old. We have been, making roads for the Roman times. It is because of that our roads are narrow, our streets are narrow, and they don't fit very large vehicles through because they were made for horse and cart. Now, because of this, we just basically pick smaller, narrower, more easily to, drive down these town roads, down these city roads. But also we have countryside roads. Countryside roads are extremely narrow, especially here in the UK, where they just wouldn't fit 2 cars coming the same way at the same time. Now, because of this, what happens with our cars is we have little lay-bys that we pull into, let a car past or a tractor go past. But 2 tractors meeting on this road, which is about the size of what your American cars are compared to ours, they just would struggle to get past each other, easily navigate around our roads. And some cities, they just physically wouldn't fit through some of the really narrow roads that we have. Now, the most popular American cars sold over here are actually sold in quite good numbers. Model 3, Model Y, Teslas, but you stop making them in America and move that production factory to China. Now, that was nothing to do with us Europeans. And we've now have got a European factory being started up in Germany for Tesla. But we used to buy a lot of American Tesla Model 3s. And yeah, it's a popular car because it's smaller. It's much more adapt to our roads. Now, it's not small by any stretch of the imagination in the Europeans' eyes. It's just narrower and does fit down our roads much more conveniently than what we're normally used to. Now, the Model X and Model S are sold here in Europe, but are not as popular. And it's not just due to the size, it's also down to price. Now, French cars are extremely popular here in the UK and Europe, and that is because they're sold from a variety of prices. Now, the cheapest electric car currently for sale, brand new here in the UK, is £15,000. Now, this isn't like a Citroen Ami, which was like a little box car like the Renault Twingo. No, the Dacia car that's made for £15,000 is a usable family car with 5 seats. Now, it doesn't have a tremendous range, but here in Europe, we don't need a tremendous range because we do not do the distances that you do in America. The average commute is under 30 miles here in the UK, and the average person in the UK doesn't really travel that often. If we do long distances, we'll fly, take trains, you know, anything else, but basically drive. We very, very rarely do long distance driving. Yes, some people do, but on tradition, most people don't. Now, to give you an idea, the average mileage here in the UK when I did this video came up at 7,000 miles per annum, which is, you know, reasonably low. It has dropped over the last few years since COVID and has been going down at a steady rate like everywhere in the world. But compare that to the US, where your average driver does 14,500 miles. And by the way, this differs from state to state. Wyoming drivers travel 21,600 miles on average per year. So when you take into consideration car size, road size, and also the cost to buy, you can start to see why European cars are more popular here in Europe than American cars. But it's not just that, it's also our European cars are built for our roads. And what I mean by that is we haven't got lovely, flat, perfectly, you know, paved roads like you have over there. A lot of our roads are older, are cracking under the seams, have Roman cobbled roads underneath, and are subject to getting damaged and a lot of wear from the variety of weather we get here in Europe. Freezing hot weather, and that basically means potholes are rife in a lot of places in Europe. Because of this, our roads are uneven. They have very large potholes and basically can be a bit of a nightmare to drive on. They're also windy, lots of turns, lots of bends, which you don't typically get in most American roads. Most of your roads tend to be straight and you tend to turn at intersections, junctions, but you don't have the same kind of waviness to it. If you've ever been to Hawaii, by the way, much more what our roads are like, you know, much more winding, much more shaped into the landscape rather than just following a set pattern. Now, because of this, it also means that our cars have adapted suspension for this. So our suspension tends to be softer, our cars tend to be a little bit nicer to drive on our roads. To give you a perfect example, the original Model 3 over here was a bit of a bone shaker to drive on European and British roads compared to the new Highlander that was specifically designed for European roads, which is an absolute dream to drive compared to the Model 3 previous. So why are European cars so popular in America? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of them may be that some Americans just prefer smaller cars. They prefer the choice of sort of brand styling that you get from European cars. Now, in general, European cars will have started to lose a slight bit of favour in America. And that's because one of the main reasons Americans used to buy European cars is because of fuel economy. Our cars, petrol and diesel cars, were built for better fuel economy. We were more sort of curious about how much fuel we could use because the price of fuel over here was a lot higher. So you used to get a lot more miles per gallon, a lot more miles per gallon. Now in EVs, Tesla have been leading the way worldwide, not just in America, but worldwide. Tesla's range and supercharging network has meant that Tesla has had the edge in America when it came to EVs. But European brands are starting to fight back, with luxury brands like BMW and Mercedes starting to pave the way into America, which brings us why Donald Trump might be right on some tariffs. Now, America actually have a car market. You actually make cars over there. You still have an industrial heartland, an industrial beating heart that makes American cars. And this is why tariffs can actually be quite important. Tariffs are specifically designed to protect domestic markets. So if you have a decent car making, you know, ability over there in America, don't let foreign imports come and dilute or ruin that market for you. Don't let cars coming in from China or Europe basically take out your industrial, you know, benefits. But at the same time, there's no reason why Donald Trump needs to punish cars going, you know, or European people need to punish cars coming from America into the, you know, into the UK. We just don't buy the cars because our French markets, our other markets supply that. Now, there's a reason why Donald Trump is also protecting against Chinese cars. Again, it's trying to protect your domestic market from falling apart. What I mean by that is Chinese markets, Chinese cars, in my opinion, here in Europe, and also would do the same in America, playing an unfair game. I think that the Chinese Communist government are subsidizing the Chinese cars considerably subsidizing them to come over to Europe because, let's be honest, for the value you're getting, especially here in Europe, Chinese cars look really cheap. to the brands that we're used to, but for a really high level of quality. Now, there is a reason, there's a couple of things at play of that. Basically, they have to be that cheap because otherwise you just wouldn't buy them, you'd pick your European brand that you like. But also because I think the Chinese government want to send some European and American car companies out of business over here. So then they could suddenly rank the price up when they are the only competition making cars over here. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but that's the way I see it. And I can fully understand why Donald Trump wants to protect the American car market from foreign imports. Here in the UK, we don't really have a domestic market, so we're more than welcoming in the cheap Chinese supply of cars at the moment while we're trying to meet net zero. The rest of Europe is a bit different. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you think I'm wrong about Donald Trump, please let me know down below in the comments, let me know. And by the way, YouTube really thinks that you'd enjoy this video here, so I recommend that you probably click it and find out why they reckon you should watch it.